Step right up. Cats is under the big top and Paramount's reimagined take on this legendary musical. But you ain't seen it quite like this. I'm talking contortion, acrobatics, juggling, aerial feats, a whole circus tent of jellicle cats. Running from April 30th to June 15th, this production of Cats is sure to enchant a new generation with imaginative storytelling and groundbreaking circus flair. Cats plus circus equals perfection. Get the tickets today at ParamountAurora.com. Use the code CityCast for $5 off per ticket, up to 4 tickets. Hey Chicago, it's Jacoby, and I just want to invite you to become a CityCast Chicago neighbor. Now, you may have heard us talk about our membership program before. We've given it a new name, Neighbors. Because being good neighbors and exploring neighborhoods are at the very heart of what CityCast is trying to do day in and day out. I don't know about y'all, but good neighbors throw some on the grill, they invite you over. We remind each other that the local farmers market is still going, check in to see if they've seen the most recent missing dog picture. And me personally, when the delivery driver just scattered the packages everywhere, I take it upon myself to organize them in the mailroom. Better neighbors make a better Chicago. And that's what CityCast has been trying to do for the last 4 years and 1,000+ episodes. When you support this podcast and newsletter, you allow us to bring you these conversations every single day. And all we're trying to do is help make this amazing, complex city a better place for you to live in. For just $10 a month, you'll get the satisfaction of supporting our work and benefits that will help the city come alive for you. As a CityCast Chicago neighbor, you're going to get insider access to member-only events, volunteer meetups, ad-free listening, a weekly roundup of the best things to do in the city, and even the chance to shout out your favorite organization or business right here on the show. Plus, when you become a neighbor this week, we gonna send you our exclusive CityCast Chicago neighbor welcome mug as a thank you gift. Yes, we didn't drop tote bags, now we got the mugs. We coming up in this world, y'all. So let's continue to define what it means to be a good neighbor in Chicago together. Head to membership.citycast.fm to become a CityCast Chicago neighbor today. Today on CityCast Chicago, Mayor Johnson is preparing for a long budget season. City Alder's been getting creative with these end of the year bonuses, and it looks like there's finally movement on the city's reparations task force. It's Friday, April 25th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. I am joined today by a good friend of the show from the Illinois Answers Project, Alex Nicken. Alex, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Man, it's good to see you. I've been enjoying this beautiful weather the last couple of days in between these small spouts of rain. What's something you looking forward to as this weather is slowly improving?
I am looking forward to walking my dog, my very sweet, energetic pit bull, who my wife and I got in November. And so we've had a long winter of trying to awkwardly squeeze little boots onto his paws, and excited to take him out, walk him along the lake. He has a lot of energy, and unfortunately, I'm not really a jogger or a runner. And so the goal is to figure out some way to ride my bike and have him run alongside me without him hopefully seeing a squirrel and darting to the side and flipping me over and sending me to the emergency room. That's the goal, at least.
Man, a couple of days ago, I was out riding a bike across Albany Park, North Park, Uptown. I was visiting some different libraries. I took a minute to stop in Winnemek Park, and I was watching this Little League baseball game, and this one kid was up there battling. He had like 6 foul balls before he finally got on base. But while he was hitting them, I noticed there was at least 30 people and their dogs out in this park. And there was one dude with this Australian Shepherd that just kept trying to pull away from him every time he saw one of these balls like land across the park. And man, it was one of those amazing sights across the city. Families was out there. People was jogging. There was people playing baseball, people playing tennis and pickleball. Like the neighborhood was buzzing, and it was just that feeling like, all right, we back now. We back outside. And so even after this conversation, I'm finna try and get out and get a little walk in. Real quick, before we jump into it, I want to talk directly to you, the listener. I mean, every Friday we bring on some friends to break down some of the biggest stories of the week. And I'm gonna be honest, we got the data. We know this is one of y'all's favorite episode. Y'all have shown up and showed out for the last 4 years. It's where we get to dive into some of the nuance of city council, aka the city council drama and the mess sometimes. We talk about what's happening in local organizations and businesses and neighborhood meetings and developments. We tap in with some Chicagoans who are making their neighborhoods better. And speaking of good neighbors, we're actually halfway through our membership campaign. If you one of those people who only listen on Fridays, well, we're going to catch you up real quick. But also, I want to thank everybody who signed up so far at membership.citycast.fm. You are helping to make sure we keep rounding up the news for many more Fridays to come. To reach our goals, we need about 26, 27 new members to sign up today, which I think we could totally do. That's like basically one of my classrooms. And so I think y'all can help us out with that. When you become a CityCast Chicago neighbor, you're not just supporting the Friday News Roundup in your feed. You're doing it for everybody, right? You carrying the Friday News Roundup on your shoulders. You're an ambassador helping to make sure everybody know what's happening in the city and making sure we all get our dose of good news, because we're going to finish every episode the exact same way. So please help Chicago stay plugged in by joining today at membership.citycast.fm. All right, let's actually do the news now. Starting with the topic we know listeners love to hear about in these roundups, because you ain't got time to read through all the budget news during the week. Alex, on the heels of a very, very tough budget season with looming federal cuts, so now Mayor Brandon Johnson is hoping to get ahead of what is shaping up to be another grueling fight. On Monday, he signed an executive order launching a task force and a review of city spending. My first question to you is this all show, or is this a real way to bring Chicagoans seriously into the budget conversation?
The short answer, Jacoby, is we don't know yet. I'll make one correction. It's not a task force. It's a working group, technically.
Okay, it's a working group.
What the difference is between those two things is maybe a matter of philosophical discussion. But yeah, it's just like you said. The mayor, I think, understandably, appropriately, is realizing that the budget season, the budget deficit that is looming for the budget year, fiscal year 2026, might end up somehow making the 2025 budget look like a cakewalk. Not only do you have this massive structural deficit that honestly this mayor diagnosed very accurately as a candidate and has done very little to actually close or address, but now on top of that you have this extra kind of existential challenge of this really hostile federal administration that is looking for seemingly any way to sort of choke off a lot of these really critical funds to the city of Chicago for all manner of things. And so essentially what the mayor announced, he signed an executive order, kind of unclear why he even had to sign an executive order for this, but just to form a sort of brain trust of folks inside the city, outside the city apparatus, business leaders, labor unions, tax policy researchers and advocates, chart a path forward. First, for the 2026 budget year, they're going to come out, they say, with a report in August on sort of what the temporary next steps would be, and then a fuller report potentially next year on a more long-term sustainable, what is our path out of this budget deficit. And so many, many working groups like this have been announced on many things in the past. A lot of them have led to really substantial action. A lot of others have just been opportunities for leaders to say, look at us, we're doing something, and then crickets afterward. So we'll just have to see.
In response to your point you made earlier about why exactly the mayor launched this in an executive order, in some ways it felt like a means of going ban for ban with the Trump administration to say like, oh, you sign executive orders, oh, we can sign executive orders to get work done as well. Because again, when this was announced, this feels like this is a part of every budget conversation, right? Aren't labor unions and business executives and residents and chambers of commerce and neighborhood groups, aren't they a part of every budget conversation? Aren't they already having public meetings across communities every budget season to ask how people want the city's funds to be prioritized. And I understand, to put dollars and cents to to what you were talking about earlier, the city is looking at tentatively a $1.12 billion shortfall, and then maybe up to $3 billion in those federal cuts. In some respects, like you said, the message is being sent like, hey, we are doing something. We understand what we are facing. And in some ways, the mayor wants to get ahead of this early and sort of put this task on all of us so that when it comes to budget season, it isn't just sort of him versus the city council like it was last year.
Right. I think that is the ultimate goal here, is to prevent anything resembling last year, which got started late. A lot of Alder people were surprised by the proposals that ended up on the table and sort of the magnitude of the property tax hike, and ended up creating a real suspense toward the end of the year of, are they going to be able to pass something before the government shuts down? That is the absolute nightmare that they're trying to prevent this year. And, this administration and past administrations have done different versions of this, sort of trying to ramp up in advance of the budget season. Mayor Lightfoot did her sort of like budget community roundtables where she had staff go to different neighborhoods and ask their ideas for the budget. Kind of unclear how those actually ended up in the budget. But this is the mayor's real acknowledgement of, there has been a lot of rumbling, especially from the city council, that the old way, the sort of decades old precedent of the mayor's administration just sort of works in a silo, comes up with its own budget proposal and wraps it in a neat little bow and presents it to the council in September and says, here, vote on this, is just not going to work anymore, especially with, frankly, how much credibility this administration has lost with this city council, and how low the level of trust is right now. And so this is something that we're actually watching really closely. It's something that readers of Illinois Answers Project, keep an eye on our business for the next week or so. We're going to have more on this, but it definitely bears watching to see what really comes out of this and how collaborative and how much of a co-pilot in this whole adventure the city council really ends up being.
The mayor went out of his way in every public address around last year's budget to say service cuts, layoffs were not on the table, even as hiring freezes were implemented and some jobs were taken off of the city's hiring board. But is it safe to say everything is on the table, right? We didn't end up getting a major property tax hike last year. Is that possible 2 years in a row?
I would be extremely surprised if they somehow managed to avoid raising property taxes. I mean, this is something that was seen as an inevitability for the last couple of years, and they somehow managed to stave off. So it's just so hard to imagine how this budget gets through without a property tax increase. To your other point about cuts, this I thought was the really interesting and newsworthy thing about the mayor's executive order signing this week. And I think I was not alone in this. What really stood out is the tone was really seeming to shift from the mayor and his administration to, we are really going to start to more seriously consider, if not exactly cuts, things like streamlining, efficiencies. At one point, the mayor said, we need to figure out how to do more with less.
Feels like that's borrowing the language of the very federal government. Like, austerity has been more palatable, it seems, across administrations on both sides of the aisle.
I mean, it's an interesting point, and especially because this was the mayor who was elected on the premise of no more austerity. The austerity didn't work. We saw the cuts and we need to reverse directions. But it just seems like the reality of the situation and the voices around him have become so loud that it's just impossible for him to avoid the idea of, we need to try something else other than just beating the same drum for progressive revenue that honestly the administration has pretty much failed to generate up until this point. And one reporter, Heather Sharon at TTW, asked, does this mean that layoffs and furloughs and job cuts and things like that are on the table? And the mayor said, well, they were always on the table. And like, that's sort of like a record scratch moment, because like, Jacoby, you're right, that he was always saying, no, they're not on the table. So that's something that obviously the labor unions are going to be watching very, very closely. It's going to be hard to imagine that they, use their considerable clout to allow any, real significant job cuts. But, I think it's also to just keep some context that, like, it's really not the case that over the last 10 years, as this structural budget deficit has developed, that the city has become bigger or more bloated or more wasteful. In fact, the city's headcount is significantly less than it was a couple of years ago. The real difference is that the city has been really scrambling to catch up on payments into its pension system. 10 years ago, the city was making payments every year of less than $500 million into its pension system. And then since Rahm Emanuel's pension ramp that he put into place in 2015 and basically said future generations are going to have to deal with this because I don't want to. Now the city is effectively on the hook for upwards of $2 billion every year and growing into its pension system. That fundamentally is the reason why the city needs all of this money and just is not finding enough of it right now. And so I do not envy the members of this working group or the mayor himself for having to thread this needle.
The city council under this mayor created a sort of, not necessarily budget task force, but wasn't it like a revenue task force?
The revenue subcommittee.
I was going to say, has anything come from the revenue task force? But once again, subcommittee, that's another one of them, right? We got working group, we got task force, we got subcommittees.
You can't confuse your commissions with your task forces, with your working groups, with your subcommittees.
Yeah.
In a word, has anything come from it? No. And what's interesting is that this has been the mayor's go-to response for the first, I don't know, at least the first year of his administration. What are you going to do about revenue? When are you going to try to bring in the progressive revenue that you promised? And he would just sort of punt it to this new subcommittee of the budget committee that he created, the revenue subcommittee, chaired by Alderman William Hall, who's a freshman alderman, but the mayor's close ally, to sort of come up with new ideas. The revenue subcommittee, basically the only real hallmark of what it has done so far is to send out a Google form to all 50 city council members asking for their revenue ideas. And that's about it as far as we know. And so I don't know exactly what the mayor was expecting. It seems to me like a pretty weighty responsibility to put on this brand new alderperson to just, come up with this subcommittee of the city council and just figure it out. But perhaps unsurprisingly, we really have not seen very many ideas at all come out of Alderman Hall and the subcommittee, other than, frankly, sort of ticky-tack, marginal, maybe even like gimmicky ideas of like, what if we sell advertising space on the Riverwalk? Things like that. Like, a bad idea? No, not necessarily. Is it going to close the city's structural deficit? I don't think so.
Pride has never been louder. Alden Amplified, a night of queer music, will be an electrifying celebration of love, resilience, and music, featuring 3 trailblazing artists taking over the Riviera Theater on Friday, June 20th, 2025. You got Vincent serving up an unforgettable fusion of pop and R&B that's gonna have you dancing all night. Parson James is bringing soulful ballads that'll touch your heart and lift your spirit. And John Duff is delivering high-energy pop anthems that command the entire stage. But wait a minute, that ain't all, y'all. You're gonna also catch epic DJ sets from some of Chicago's hottest talents like Miss Toto and Icy Baby. Trust me, you won't be able to stay off the dance floor. So kick off Pride Fest weekend with a night where you'll feel seen, heard, and celebrated. Alden Amplified is at the Riviera Theater on Friday, June 20th. Tickets at moatsevents.live/tickets. You can save $5 when you use the code CityCast. Well, go ahead and hurry up. This exclusive deal ends May 15th, and these tickets are going fast. Don't wait and be part of a night that promises to be out, loud, and unforgettable. That's moatsevents.live/tickets. I talk about my moms all the time on the show, so y'all know how much I love Mama T, but I'm gonna be real, buying gifts for her can be a little tough, right? When she sees something, she like it, she just get it. So for her recent birthday, I needed something that said, I appreciate you, I love you, I'm thinking about you all the time, and I ultimately landed on the Aura frame. It's a digital picture frame. In fact, it's the best digital photo frame according to the people over at Wirecutter. My mom sees it every day on the table in her entryway. I've uploaded photos of some of our favorite family moments together, like a huge throwback of all of us together at Kalahari up in the dunes, a recent one with my siblings and my mom at a Bulls game. I got a picture with our grandparents. Plus, anybody can add pictures from wherever they live, and she'll see them almost immediately and know we're thinking about her. Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day coming up. For a limited time, listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver matte frame. That's Aura, A-U-R-A, frames.com, promo code CityCast. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. All right, real quick. Before we jump into the next topic, I kind of want to give y'all a little peek behind the curtain into how we go about making these Friday episodes, because I think it's pretty cool. Obviously, our producers, Simone Alisea, Michelle Navarro, cut these things up to make sure they sound good. But before we get to this point, we are friends with some of the best and smartest journalists in the city, people who are tapped in, looking for answers, sitting through city council meetings, sifting through Freedom of Information Acts and 1,000-page documents, and generally just keeping track of everything that makes Chicago tick. So we asked them, right, these experts, whether they are in music or in food or down at City Hall or in environmental justice, whatever the case may be, what do you think is the biggest story this week on your beat or in your world? We asked them, what's something that you think should get more attention? And we also asked them, what is some good news? I ain't even gonna get there, right? We asked them some good news they want to share with the people listening, right? Something that is happening in their own life, an event they're looking forward to, a story they read that they want to discuss. And essentially, this is what you're supporting when you become a member of CityCast Chicago. Not just the newsletter and the episodes, but the processes that make them. And you can sign up at membership.citycast.fm. All you gotta do is throw us a little coin, about $10 a month. I spent $10 yesterday on some Chief Keef designer Fronto. And do I regret it? Honestly, no, not really. And I don't think you would regret throwing us $10 a month either. And then we're going to keep bringing you these conversations with people who know what the hell they talking about. And with the extra coin, you're going to also get them extra bennies too. Ad-free listening, invites to members only events. You're going to clean out the podcast feed from all them little suggestions. And I'm going to shout you out by name if you join today. And Emmy going to toss you in a newsletter as well. So you can do it at membership.citycast.fm. But let's get back to one of those stories that needs a little more attention this week. Alex, you recently wrote about how bonuses are being used in our Alder people's offices, specifically for their staffers. I think we need to talk about this.
Yes. So the thing about this is that they're technically not even bonuses, because bonuses are technically not allowed within the city council. There's no mechanism to give them. So what is happening is that increasingly older people are temporarily raising their staffers' salaries, sometimes to really extreme levels, right at the end of the year and just for a couple of pay periods. And so they are effective bonuses where in a lot of cases, they're getting an extra couple $1,000s at the end of the year. In some extreme cases, they're getting $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 at the end of the year. But for all of the world and what it looks like, if you go onto the city's payroll database, you will see that ex-staffer to, Alderman Nick Spizzato has a $340,000 salary. And then everyone freaks out and is like, what in the world is going on here?
Is that higher than the alder person themselves?
That would be, yeah. And again, it's very important to, alder people generally make, it's a little bit of a range, but in the range of like 120 to 140,000 a year. No aide to a city council member made more than an alder person last year. That's really important to point out.
Okay.
So like that aide did not earn $340,000 last year. What happened is that the very last pay period of the year, their salary was raised to an annual level of $340,000 a year, so that on that one paycheck, they would get a $10,000 extra payout, right? So like that's what we're talking about here. It's confusing. It is opaque. And that's really the issue here because, again, it's important to point out no rules have been broken here. Older people, as have been the first to say, like they're spending the dollars out of their own personnel budgets in the way that they see fit because that's how it works. Unlike with most other city employees, where the budget is like this position gets this salary, that position gets that salary, older people get $309,000 each, plus whatever money they get for committees that they chair for staff, and they can use it however they want. And so the way that they increasingly, again, a lot more in the last couple of years, we found what they've been doing at the end of the year is if they have any reserve money left over or unspent money left over in their personnel accounts, instead of just letting that go back into the city's corporate fund, the general fund, which would happen, they are finding this loophole to sort of shower it on their aides and their staffers. And they say, listen, that's just how it works. We don't have any way to give bonuses. The irony is that they make the rules. They write the budget, the city council. They are allowed to design this process however they want. They can create automatic cost of living increases or step increases or, salary increases for their employees. They can create ways for their staffers to be reimbursed when they pay out of pocket for things. They can create schedules or processes for regular bonuses that are recorded, that are shown explicitly for what they really are. But instead, there's this very strange salary increase process that has created a lot of confusion and has been, frankly, pretty misleading to the public.
I can imagine for you, myself, like if that happened to us, that sounds pretty fire. Why should, we be, I mean, I get the point you make about they set the rules here. So beyond selfishly this sounding like something I'd want to happen to me, why is this something that like Chicagoans should at least be asking questions about?
Well, because there are employees, they work for us. Anyone who works for the city council, for these staffers, and we need to know how taxpayer money is being spent generally. And another wrinkle to this, or something to keep in mind, and this is something that Joe Ferguson at the Civic Federation brought up when we talked to him for this story, is that when you create a kind of arbitrary process like this that is not transparent, that is entirely up to the individual alderperson to decide who gets what, and it's not documented, that leaves the door open for a lot of favoritism, transactional, kind of seedy, unseemly behavior like that. What I keep coming back to is that every time I have brought up this story to someone, even like as I was working on it or just sort of like gave a general description of it, everyone's first reaction, right, is like, oh, someone's got some kind of sweetheart deal off of this, or this has got to be some kind of corruption or some kind of arrangement or deal or quid pro quo, something dirty is going on here, which is a sad state of affairs that's just kind of what the natural public assumption is in a lot of cases for things that people don't understand about city government. And so on a certain level, the way that something looks really matters. It really matters for building people's trust in government because, again, this is something that Ferguson said, if something is opaque and you can't tell what's going on, unfortunately, people are going to assume the worst.
According to your report, between October and December of 2024, 65 staffers saw pay increases and at least 20 saw bumps of at least $5,000. And again, to your point, Alderwoman Pat Dowd defended the process and has said it's a way to reward people, to your point, to Ferguson's point, then like build it into the system, then like legislate it versus doing it this way.
It's completely within their power. And, to her credit, to Alderman Dowell's credit, they're not wrong about the fact that these folks are in many cases overworked and underpaid. Mm-hmm. I mean, you said that you would like to get a $5,000 or $10,000 bonus at the end of the year. So would I. You know what I would not like to do is to spend 12 hours a day answering frantic constituent phone calls about overgrown trees and potholes and running around trying to put out fires all day, every day from constituents. In a lot of cases, that's what these folks are doing. They're public servants. Mm-hmm. They deserve to get paid, But we also, as taxpayers, deserve to be able to have real insight into an agency over how they're getting paid and how it's all working.
What sort of promises have you made to yourself this year? Getting in better shape, eating healthier, saving more money, traveling somewhere new? What about discovering a new culture by learning a new language? With Babbel, you can do that in just a few weeks. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by over 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks or whatever pace you choose. And because conversing is the key to really understanding each other in new languages, Babbel is designed using practical, real-world conversations. The Spanish I learned on Babbel really helped me on a recent trip to Mexico City, ordering in restaurants, shopping at the textile market, cheering on at the Lucha Libre, and I've been keeping it up since I got home. You're a podcast listener. I know that because you're listening here. I bet you'll love Babbel's new podcasts. On Eavesdrop in Espanol, which I listen to, you get to listen to a real conversation, then have the teacher host explain back to you. Then you listen again and catch everything. And you can even read along in the transcript. It's a really fun and effective way to learn. Let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting CityCast listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hey, CityCast. According to me and my calculator, you will spend more time this week between the sheets than you will at work. So upgrade your sheets to Cozy Earth. Luxury starts where you rest. I start my evening in buttery soft Cozy Earth bamboo pajamas. Then I dip into a Cozy Earth bamboo sheet set. They are silky and temperature regulating. Forget the 9 to 5. Prioritize your 5 to 9. Cozy Earth products will transform those hours into a sanctuary. And they take comfort seriously with a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. Luxury should not be out of reach, so Cozy Earth is giving CityCast listeners 40% off their best-selling sheets, towels, pajamas, and more. Visit CozyEarth.com and use the code CozyChicago for 40% off, because you deserve a great night's sleep, and sanctuary awaits at Cozy Earth.
Every single episode of CityCast Chicago ends with some good news. Alex, your good news happens to be another task force out of City Hall. Update us on the mayor's move on the reparations task force.
We're drowning in task forces. This is the latest effort to maybe, finally, actually, potentially explore doing something about reparations for Black Chicagoans in a way that's funded by the city of Chicago. This is not a new idea, obviously. This is something that within the city council, Alderman Dorothy Tillman in 2002 had sort of made rumblings about. It's something that there was a lot of discourse around, obviously, about 10 years ago with Ta-Nehisi Coates' case for reparations. Folks were talking about it. And then most recently, in 2020, after the George Floyd murder and sort of all of the different racial reckoning conversations that happened around it, it became more serious within Chicago and the city council itself. And at the time, Alderman Roderick Sawyer, the chair of the City Council Health and Human Relations Committee, went to Mayor Lightfoot and said, I want to create a commission to study reparations. And Lightfoot said, maybe you can make it a subcommittee within the city council. And so it became a subcommittee. It was chaired by Alderwoman Stephanie Coleman. They met one time and listened to some experts and really didn't do anything after that. And now our current mayor, Mayor Johnson, has come out and said, we're reopening this issue. We're revisiting it. We are creating a task force.
Yeah, last June, he officially established the reparations task force to examine all the ways Chicago policies have harmed Black folks and make appropriate recommendations. But up until this point, we hadn't heard anything.
Right. I mean, obviously, listen, this is something that this mayor, a concept, has been very open to and spoken warmly of. He is certainly not shy about speaking very directly to systemic anti-black racism and its legacies in Chicago and the need to make that right. This is the first step that we've seen from him to actually make something out of it. You know, how much of a something that is obviously is to be seen, but this time they're putting out public applications for anyone. You can be a member of this task force and talk about it. And in the context of this, we already know a lot about reparations and how they might work. And this is, again, a conversation that's been going on for a long time. The city of Evanston, I'm sure I've heard you on your show talk about them and the way that they're doing it with home buyers assistance and home repair loans for folks who can show that their family was lived in Evanston during some like predatory housing practices. Even Ta-Nehisi Coates, when he was talking about the case for reparations, credited Chicago as for one policy as like a potential way to enact reparations, which was he was talking about the move that Chicago Public Schools made to include a unit about Police Commander John Burge and his torture regime, to mandate that, to include that in the CPS budget. And Coates said, like, listen, including a conscious discussion of systemic racism in a public school curriculum, like that really is a kind of reparations. Like that's a way of making it right. And so it'll be interesting to see how expansively this task force thinks about what it really means to sort of heal and right past wrongs in a way that goes beyond what a lot of folks think of reparations as being, which is just like a check sent to someone. So again, like every other commission, task force, working group, subcommittee, they've done it, they've gotten the attention. Now it's on them to actually show that they can do something.
25 members of the task force will be appointed by the mayor and the city council's Black Caucus, led by Alderwoman Stephanie Coleman from the 16th Ward. 15 spots on the task force will be set aside for Chicagoans who can now apply. You will be paid to serve. I'll drop a link in the show notes, and applications are going to be accepted through May 20th. Real quick, I'd love to see this not be a task force, a working commission, a subcommittee, whatever we're going to call it, that never meets. I hope they come up with ways that not only include cash payments to the descendants of the enslaved Black Chicagoans who suffered under Jim Crow, the segregation of the North when they migrated up here, folks who were redlined out of home ownership, political participation, their neighborhoods divested from, weren't allowed to more efficiently own businesses, to easily move around the city for enjoyment. Right. I also want to see more curriculum being installed across Chicago public schools, more public monuments, more mechanisms for neighborhood investment, for affordable housing in the city, for more environmental justice, but specifically in the name of reparations for the disenfranchised, not just programs that the city was already planning to invest in. And so my hope is that they lean into their mission statement, which, as the Chicago Defender reminds us, is to define what Black reparations means specific to Chicago. Identify key areas of harm from housing, policing, incarceration, education, economic development, but ultimately make clear recommendations, provide remedies for reparative action that move us forward. And so my hope is at the least this is a productive conversation that Chicagoans can be a part of and that gets us somewhere. And so, Alex, I appreciate you bringing this story up today. My good news is a few of my weekend plans that I'm looking forward to. Tonight, Chicago's own Brittany Carter is opening up for the Offbeat tour with Kaylin Ellis in collaboration with Real Ones. The show will be at Book Club off Lincoln and Lakewood. Definitely follow Real Ones show on Instagram. They also have some fantastic events they putting you on every single week. I'm also excited for tomorrow's Cherry Blossom Festival from 1 to 3 in Jackson Park in the historic Garden of the Phoenix. There are going to be art events. There are going to be drummers. There's going to be food. It's going to be a great time. And then On Sunday, I am finally getting to go to the Goodman to see Bus for my homie. We've been friends since high school all the way through college. I'm so proud that this is his first show finally coming to Chicago, Cecil Butcher. And so it's going to be a fantastic weekend. I'm looking forward to it. One more piece of good news. You guessed it. Our membership campaign. I know I've been talking about it all week, but that's just because I am grateful to everyone who has joined so far, including Mary R., Linda T., Catherine M., Jacoby H., Rebecca S., and Kelly J. They became CityCast Chicago neighbors this week by signing up at membership.citycast.fm. That means they also gonna leave here with a special members only mug. Oh, I ain't even talk about that mug today, did I? Now, I know I got your attention. I met with a homie about a week ago, Leona, and she was like, hey, when I hear that y'all got merch, I perk up a little bit. So I know y'all are thinking about that mug, but you wonder, is it worth the $10, right? I've been getting it free for a couple of weeks, for a couple of months, for a couple of years. And to that, I would say, this is a nice way to say thank you. I appreciate it. And beyond that, make sure we can keep doing this for weeks and months and years to come. It would mean the world to all of us. And again, we're going to give you a huge shout out. If you're trying to get like all of our CityCast Chicago neighbors and get this mug, support a little local journalism at the same time, you already know where to go. Membership.citycast.fm. I want to give a huge thank you to our guest today. Probably like his 14th, 15th time on the show, from the Illinois Answers Project, Alex Nicken. Always a good time, my friend.
Feeling is mutual. Thanks so much for having me on, Jacoby.
I also want to give a huge thank you to all of the people who make CityCast Chicago possible. Our executive producer is Simone Alisea. Our producer is Michelle Navarro. Our Hey Chicago newsletter editor is Emmy Mack. Our social media manager is Rick Holmes. Speaking of social media, make sure you are following us on Instagram and TikTok. Rick has been doing some great work over there. He dropped a video earlier this week about one of Chicago's most prolific artists, Richard Hunt. He also talked about the Light of Truth, Ida B. Wells National Monument in Bronzeville. It's a great video. You want to check it out. I also want to give a huge thank you to all of the people who make the music that we love listening to. Sam Thousand, all the kimonos, Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop, additional music this week from The New Fools, Ingrid Witt and Sarah the Instrumentalist, courtesy of epidemicsound.com, as well as Wendy Marcini. If you sat through all of this, if you made it to this point in the episode, then I'm assuming that you either enjoying it or you got it automatically playing in the background, which I know a couple of y'all do. Yeah, that's for you if you weren't paying attention and you were just kind of dozing off. Hey, I appreciate you. Thank you. However you listening, it means a lot to us. We're going to be back bright and early on Monday. In the meantime, in between time, head over to chicago.citycast.fm. Why, Kobe? Sign up, become a member, check out the events calendar, subscribe to Hey Chicago, do something. I'm going to talk to y'all on Monday. Peace.